record on this computer, and we're recording.
Oh, you are recording already now.
Yes. So welcome everybody, and in particular, welcome Christian, my namesake, and it's really delightful to be with you again on another webinar. The title of tonight's webinar is Surrender. That was your choice, and I thought it was a lovely title because it's an interesting concept in the field of addiction, which is a field that, well, both you and I, Christian, and also one of the guests here tonight, Tony, all have some interest in, to say the least. And I was just thinking, just recently, a woman that I know through a networking thing who knew that I was in recovery told me that she'd come across some AA materials, and she was kind of horrified by some of the steps and this reference to powerlessness and surrender and so on. And she said to me, I mean, surely you don't see it like that. And I could see where she was coming from, but I mean, what I had to say to her was, well, actually, yes, I do, and it's the great irony is that in kind of surrendering, which is really accepting the limitations of personal power, it kind of opens up a whole new way of life, as I see it. But anyway, it's your topic, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you're going to say about it tonight, Christian.
Yeah.
But so I'm going to hand that over to you. But I would also just love to hear a little bit about how you got to be where you are today, which is a 3 principles facilitator working in the field of addiction, based in Copenhagen in Denmark.
Okay, I can do that. So my name is Christian. Hello, buddy. Most people that are working with addiction, as far as I know, have at some point in time been addicted themselves. And I'm no exception. So I've been smoking for 45 years, and back in 2001, my wife and I decided that now it was time to stop. And we have both tried a lot of times, very unsuccessfully, but this time it was absolutely different. My wife, Pernille, had read a book written by a Dutchman, and he was cooperating with the process instead of chewing the carpet, etc., which is the normal way to stop smoking. What happened was that we both succeeded. She didn't have any problems at all. And I had 2 days that were pretty horrible, but after having smoked for 45 years, I thought that 2 days would be a rather small investment. So after those 2 days, I didn't have a problem. And we started out making up a course structure, and then we approached companies, and we approached public institutions, etc. I have been working ever since. And we're still doing that. If any of you should wonder how old I am, I'm 76, and I still enjoy going out, and I still enjoy talking to people. So this is a very important part of my life. With regards to the 3 principles, I came across them back in 2014. I had been to something called matrix energetics, which is a sort of psychological way of healing, and I were doing some workshops together with other people in Copenhagen, and some of these people mentioned Cindy Banks, and I had never heard of him. I thought I had heard most, but I've never heard about him. So I started to Google him. And the more I Googled, the more interested I got. And together with my wife, we decided that we were going to go to Salt Spring Island back in November 2014. And met Elsie and Chip. And I had this fantastic experience of suddenly being in what you would call, or what I would call, nowhere land, in a state of mind that was absolutely tranquil. I had the feeling of connectedness with everybody in the room. It was and stuck with me for 1 or 2 weeks. And it sort of turned my way of looking at myself totally 180 degrees around. And consequently, when you have that kind of experience, you want to share it with everybody else, and you want that everybody should have that experience, because it is absolutely life-changing. Now, this is an old clock I have inherited. You have to bear with me now and so on. So we started doing that, and then after that we started to. I read some books, and the theme of today is surrendering. And having worked with addiction for quite some time, we found that surrendering is an extremely important part of breaking an addiction. If you don't surrender to the process that you have started with, you decide to stop an addictive behavior, you're going to have a problem. So in my case, the surrender was really a decision to start working together with the detox problem, and start looking at that what role smoking had played in my life. And I can say this, that I've written a little book that called "The Reason for Smoking is Totally Misunderstood," because smoking is not a problem. Smoking is a solution. So you have to look behind and see what is the smoking behavior helping you to cope with, what underlying sort of things is really the trigger of the smoking behavior. And the more we looked into that, the more successful we became with the clients we had. So because all of a sudden they started to understand their behavior. So surrendering in connection with that was really very important for us, and really one of the main themes that is part of the core structure that we are having. When Christian asked me to participate in this, I sat down and I wrote a couple of sentences. Surrender, teaching a change in addiction, surrendering to circumstance, beware of possibilities. And then I wrote another name, which I think it is important that you, if you're not acquainted with it, she is an interesting person. And she is called Elisabeth Kübler-Ross. And I don't know whether you've heard of her. She is a Swiss psychiatrist. Mm-hmm. And what she had discovered was that when people got terminal diagnosis or were put in a situation that was absolutely non-negotiable, they usually went through a 5-point cycle. And the first of these would be denial. So this is not happening to me. This is happening to somebody else. It can't be true, etc. And the denial phase could take quite a long time. When they have gone through the denial phase and had to accept that really it was happening to them, then anger stepped into the picture. So they started to be angry. They were angry with their fellow human beings. They were angry with God. They were angry with whatever and whoever they could project their anger to. And when the anger then subsided, then they entered a bargaining sort of phase. Now, dear God, if I start to behave this way and this way and this way, could you then, etc., etc. So they started a bargaining in order to try to improve their situation. And when the bargaining didn't work, then the next phase would be depression. So now everything was black, nothing more to do, etc., etc. There was still a fight and non-acceptance of the situation. And when the depression then lifted, it was always followed by an acceptance of the situation. And the moment the situation was accepted, the person found peace. And the person found peace not only with himself, with families, with the whole situation. And there was clarification of the situation. There was the clarification of the life situation, etc. So in Elizabeth's cycle, acceptance is really synonymous with surrendering to the situation. And I think it's interesting. And when I heard about it 10 years ago, the first thing that struck me was the thought that you don't necessarily have to be have a terminal diagnosis in order to accept the situation you are in. You might be able to do that in an earlier stage. And this again led me on to the surrender concept, which I had a chance to exercise back in 2011 when I got a cancer diagnosis. I had a diagnosis from a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and I went through surgery, and I went through chemo, and I went through radiation. But the whole thing, and was in very, very close cooperation with my wife and with the hospital personality, other person. What really happened was that we surrendered to the process. We didn't surrender to the disease, but we surrendered to the process we were dealing with. And I think that's very important, because if you surrender to the disease, you have put yourself in a victim position. If you surrender to the process, you still have something to say. So what was important for me in that situation was that I didn't identify with the disease. I took ownership of it. And as soon as you do that, you remove the victim story out of the equation. And I really think that is the main point of surrendering, is really that the moment you surrender, the moment you have eliminated the victim story out of your life. Some people say, if anybody has any questions, please don't hesitate. But I'd like to say this. Some people confuse surrendering with defeat. This is not true. On the contrary, surrendering is really getting control. I have been working now. I'm working together with. I've been working on a seminar I'm going to have in Copenhagen on the 14th of November together with Jacqueline Hollows, and it was quite a big mouthful, and I was looking at it, and the more I looked at it, the more complex I thought it looked. Until I decided, in some mysterious way, I had a question in my head that said, what do you want to get out of this? And the moment that I decided that I didn't care what's going to go out of it, I didn't care. The moment you decide with yourself that you don't care who is taking credit for what you're doing, and you don't care about the outcome, you get a liberty to unfold yourself, because you have nothing at stake anymore. So the moment that I decided that I was going to get out of the way in the process of making this seminar happen, everything started to fall into place. It was like, I think that many of you know Carl Friedrich Jung and his synchronicity. And synchronicity is really what happens the moment that you get out of the way of the process that you have taken on to fulfill. So a little further along the way, I came across a book called by a chap called Michael Singer, which is called The Surrender Experiment. And the surrender experiment really is an experiment about how a bright young man decides that the intelligence of nature probably would be better to manage his life than he would be himself, and he decides to step back and see, be the observer in his life and see what happens. And the moment I was here, when I was preparing myself a little bit for this tonight here, I invariably came to think about Findhorn. The Findhorn community in Scotland, which was established back in 1962 by Eileen Caddy, Peter Caddy, and a woman called Dorothy McLean. Now that community today is not only an eco-village that is a standard, it is also a very huge spiritual community today. But none of that could have happened if they hadn't surrendered to the task at hand, which was channeled to Eileen Caddy during the morning hours. She was Eileen Caddy was sitting in the toilet in a camping sort of spot and taking notes from the Lord, and Peter Caddy was then carrying them out and making them all happening. So the moment that you find out that surrendering is really letting a greater intelligence start to take care of your life, the moment your life is going to get easier. That doesn't mean that you're not going to use your intellect. You still have to catch the train, and you still have to prepare yourself for whatever is practical in the physical world. But having this laid back attitude, it really helps a lot. It's difficult and it is challenging because we are all living in and have been programmed to be living in a dual world where we had to cope with you and what's outside, etc. And so we have a lot of strategies that we have adapted throughout the years, survival strategies, and putting them away can be very, very challenging. But it's worth trying. It is really, really worth trying. So one of the questions I get is, what do I gain? Because surrendering, it really means that I have to give up a lot of things. And the question is, which I think is interesting, is if you look at it through 3P glasses, then what you are surrendering is really nothing. I was lying one morning in the gray zone between being asleep and being awake. And all of a sudden I had a very strange vision of a lampshade. This lampshade had a lot of pictures on it they were all blown out onto the walls with a very strong light bulb. And I looked at all these pictures in my room, and I thought that they were all pictures of my beliefs and my attitudes, etc., etc. And I thought I was going mad, because all of a sudden it dawned on me that the concept of me really is nothing but a thought construction. There is nothing except thought. And the reason why I thought I was going to be mad was really the realizing that my whole life, all of my 76 years, not all 75, I had been placing validity on this thought structure and really had considered them to be a fact of life. And that was really life-changing, and I get very charged and moved whenever I think about it, because the relief that followed that insight was really enormous. So So what was it that I had to give up? What I had to give up was really a mental construction that was an illusion. And for me, that was really life changing. So what do you give up when you surrender? Actually, you don't get anything up. What do you gain? You gain everything, because everything is given to you if you pay attention. Whenever you set your mind to something, you will feel the backup that is automatically coming along. So what happened to me was really in connection with the seminar that I was going to make was really that from out of nowhere came contact suggestions, new prospects, etc., etc. And the funny thing about it was that whenever I contacted the persons that came about, the name of the person that came about in that way, they all said yes. I didn't have to argue. I didn't have to do a lot of explanations of what the 3P are, etc., etc. And by the way, I don't know whether any of you have had that challenge here explaining what the 3 principles are. I did it to one of the in the initial phase. I did it to one of the person in the criminal reward system in Denmark, and she kept saying, "Well, it's just like cognitive therapy." I said, "No, it's not like cognitive therapy." No, I mean, it's more than metacognitive therapy. No, I said, no, it's not that. And I've been looking around and saying, what can I say to make these people stop saying it's just like that? And then it dawned on me that the easiest way to stop people making connections to what they already know is really, when it dawned on me, it struck me, I just said, well, it's an understanding. It's a new understanding. Oh, then all of a sudden there were they didn't have anything to hang their coat on, because a new understanding didn't really challenge one they already knew. It was something new. It really sort of aroused their curiosity. So if you can use that, if you are talking with people, it's a pretty good angle to do it that way. So
we do have a question, Christian, from
yes,
Tony's raised his hand, so I'm going to unmute you, Tony. Oops, I can't seem to unmute you. Tony, can you unmute yourself? I don't know what's going on with my controls tonight. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, yeah, it's lovely listening to you. And it's funny, I went to an AA meeting today and they read out, which is without doubt the most common reading in an AA meeting, which is a story in one of the stories at the back of the big book, and it's acceptance is the answer. So they read it out, and I'm very aware of those stages of grief that you're talking about as well. What I wanted to ask you was that, like, a lot of people I find that have accepted something say to people, what you need to do is accept the situation. It seems to be something people talk about when they've done it, because they wake up one day and they're aware that they are now in this place of acceptance. They're aware that things have shifted for them. And the people that are in a situation where they could be any of those different stages you're talking about, there's no time frame on denial, anger, blame, except there's no time frame. And I've known people that have been in so-called grief for 15 years over people dying. So there doesn't seem to be any particular conscious process that you can take yourself through, a bit like a diet, so that you know that you're going to get acceptance in a period of time. So my question is, how do you do it?
Well, I think what is in my world, and Tony, I'm just speaking out of my experience. In my experience, what helps is to know what is going on.
Okay.
So awareness of, for me, awareness of the cycles that Kübler-Ross came around with is really, for me, very helpful. Because if I am not if I am not at peace with myself, then I am in some of the other phases.
Okay.
Could I say? Sorry,
yeah.
I didn't mean to, I thought you carry on, Christian.
No, please.
Because I was going to say that although I'm very aware of Elizabeth Kübler-Ross's work and have been for years, for me, the 3 principles is really, it really transcends that.
Yeah.
So that, and this happened to me before I could explain it at all. Very soon after I got into the principles 8 years ago, my father died. And the experience, without going into all of that, the experience I had of that was quite extraordinary. Something had shifted in me. And funnily enough, I just heard I was having a conversation with a colleague today, and it wasn't that there was it wasn't that there was no grief or no sadness, because there was some of that. But a colleague, I've heard this over and over, that because it really is the truth that whatever the event, no matter how big, the potential to be at peace with it is there. It's no longer the case that one necessarily has to go through stages.
Great.
And that has been my experience over and over, including when I was told in a hospital emergency room that I was possibly dying of a brain hemorrhage and would be having a lumbar puncture shortly. I went into a place of complete peace. Now, it wasn't denial. It was absolute knowledge of what was going on and some certainty about the priorities in my life. But for me, there is a danger, and I think Elizabeth Kübler-Ross's work was very helpful, and it was a true observation of what she heard. But she was measuring people who hadn't come across the principles, and the power of, or the potential to have an insight and see something fresh is there in the face of anything, even the worst of things. Now, to answer your question, Tony, which is, how do we get it?
I'm sorry. Let me just rephrase that. I meant, how do we get it from a perspective of that particular process that Christian was talking about? I don't mean it in terms of. I mean, if as they would say, from what I've understood in the principles, we're a thought away from it, aren't we? I mean, it can change at any moment how we see anything.
Yeah.
And I understand that. I was just spent from the particular process that Christian was talking about. I can't pronounce the lady's name, but from that perspective, you can point at these different stages that people are in.
Yeah.
But there's no time frame.
No.
There's no time frame. And if what you're saying is what helped you is just to know that those are the different categories, and maybe you could see that today you're in anger or blame, and that was helpful to you, then maybe that's your answer. But I just wondered what you would say to someone that was going, okay, great, how do I get myself to acceptance by this time tomorrow?
Tony, my take on that would be that I think that you're absolutely right that there's no time frame in any of the phases. No, not if you are unaware. My take on it is that the more aware you are of the cycles, and the more aware you are with the final goal of peace with yourself, which is the final in connection with the acceptance, the more you can shortcut the process, so that you don't have to stick around in the different phases for a longer period of time, but maybe even be able to jump over some of the elements in that cycles. And I really think that's the most important thing, and it really relates to the 3 principles as well, and that is the moment that you grasp, you have an understanding of what it is that makes up for your experience, the easier it will be for you to get out of a problem situation, because you know where it comes from. And I think that if you are aware that you have this 5-phase cycles, and you are sufficiently connected to yourself to know where you are, then my guess is that you will shorten that time very, very substantially.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Tony. But Christian, so I guess I need to come back to you, because it seems to me that Elisabeth Kubler-Ross's cycles are in fact thought. It's a description of thought-created feelings, and that they're absolutely not essential.
Yeah.
That has been, that really has been my experience. But if you believe that they are, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
I would tend to agree to that.
Mm-hmm. So, and that's that really is the beauty and the potential of because I mean, in a sense, Elisabeth Kubler-Ross is part of the old paradigm that that we are that something other than thought in the moment is the creator of our experience. And
are you all right with that, Tony?
Well, I was really asking you, because without wanting to be confrontational, I totally do not, I really see the three principles as offering relief from that, from the sort of despair that one, the idea that one would have to go through all these, difficult and challenging process. Not that the three principles takes us out of life, but it just becomes it's not a prescription.
No. But I think that my world really got very much easier the moment that I put words on my understanding, so how I see the three principles, and it dawned on me that it is an understanding of the underlying principles of the human experience. That really made a lot of sense, because. To me, that clarified everything, and for somebody else it would be something else. And for most people, they would say, "Well, that's the way we have seen it all the time. I just had seen it that way." And it also made it easier. In my world, the more difficult it is to explain the three principles of what you think about them. In my world, the less you have understood what you're really talking about, and to me, the formulation that it is an understanding of the underlying principles really made my life much easier, because all of a sudden I could rest assured in what I was talking about, because I really believe that to be true.
And just to say to those of you who've joined us since we started, please do come in if you have questions. So you'll be very welcome. It'll be lovely to hear from you. And Tony's just sent a message saying he has to leave us. Yeah.
Well, I think we can make another addition to this question, because surrendering is really the road to peace, and that means that as long as you are still struggling with either issues or life, etc., you are suffering, and it is really this dual perspective that there is something that you have to do in order to feel better. That is one of the big. Oh, can you hang on a moment? Yeah, sorry.
Sorry about this, folks. I was trying to find the pause video button, but here we are. You're back.
Yeah, I'm back. We had some girls coming along. It's at trick and treat. It's the Halloween sort of thing.
Same here.
Okay, sorry about that. I was talking about suffering. So in essence, Christian, what is it really that we are surrendering when we do surrender? It is really, as I see it, it's really the duality we have, that we are in the surrendering sort of process. We totally accept who we are. So there is no confrontation anymore. There is no discussion anymore. We are at peace with who we are. And it struck me as soon as you agree with yourself, and as soon as you surrender to exactly who you are, then you don't have any sort of controversies with the outside world anymore. People start smiling at you. Things become easier, etc., etc. So much of the surrender is really an acceptance of that you are who you are, and what you are is okay.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, I was thinking when you were speaking, I was thinking of what I suppose was the biggest example of surrender in my life at the time that I got sober. And much of how I now see that is with the benefit of hindsight. But I had really resisted the idea that I was an alcoholic, that I was out of control. My drinking was out of control. I really didn't want that to be the case. And I was even more resistant to the idea that I would have to stop drinking. And then what happened is what I would now call a massive insight. And it occurred one night when I had got much drunker than I intended, and I was, I saw my reflection. I hated what I'd become. And in an instant, that resistance just melted. And I surrendered to the fact that I didn't use those words in the moment, but as I now see it, I surrendered to the fact that I did have this addiction. I surrendered to the fact that this was the only solution for me, just to become abstinent. And even though until that moment I had not managed to stay abstinent for a day in years, and I surrendered to the fact that for me, again, that a 12-step program was the place to go. I somehow knew all of this instantly. And I think, I'm just reflecting also on Tony's question. I don't think you can make any of that happen. Indeed, while I was resistant, I didn't want it to happen. But I think something of the being willing to reconsider, being willing to look for answers, can make you susceptible to acceptance or surrender, because it seems to me there is something of a gift in it. It is a moment of grace. It's not, or certainly it's not something that's under control of my ego. That's how I see it. I don't know whether you or whether anybody else in the call has any thoughts on that.
No.
That's sort of a giving up of ego almost, and opening to the universe, which I had, at that point, a very, very limited and cynical openness to anything spiritual.
Yeah. Are there any questions from Vicky or Birdie?
I'm going to mute Birdie. Hi.
Yeah, hiya. Yes, Christian, you were talking about resistance then. And really, when we're in resistance, we don't accept anything. Mm-hmm. And we're opposing every situation, really, and we're at war with everything. But that's all ego. Resistance is totally ego, isn't it, all the time? But once you drop that, or for whatever reason you come into acceptance and surrender, it's just not a problem anymore. There are no problems anymore.
that is very, very true. And when we are working with nicotine addiction, smoking, etc., then it is fantastic to see that when people surrender to the conditions they are in when they are not allowed to smoke, they have no urge. People with a consumption of 20 to 30 cigarettes a day can sit in an airplane for 6 hours on end without having any urge. The urge arises the moment they see that their suitcase, but when they have landed. But during the flight, 99% of the people we have been talking to have no urges. They can sit in meetings, no urges. So when you surrender to the situation you are in, the consequences are that your addictive behavior disappears, but it arises with the opportunity. So as soon as the opportunity presents itself, then the urge is a consequence of that opportunity arising. So, and what does that mean? It really puzzled me for quite some time. We were out in companies that had introduced smoke ban during working hours, and they were still smoking a pack a day. And I said, well, isn't that a problem for you during work hours, 8 to 9 hours? They said, no. I said, why not? Oh, because we have just made up that when it's not possible, then it's not a problem.
Yeah, it is a habit because, I mean, I was a smoker myself.
Yeah.
It definitely was a habit, but it was also, it's very true what you were saying. It's not the smoking or the nicotine habit. It's the emotion that you try to hide by having the cigarettes.
Yeah.
That's what was causing the problem. And I was feeling very insecure at that point in time because there was a lot of bullying and all that sort of stuff going on at work and causing a lot of stress in the moment.
Yeah.
But it's very clear. I mean, I was a clinician, so all day, every day, I couldn't have a cigarette. But the moment I was out of the clinic and in my car driving home, the cigarette was out. And I'd come home and have a meal. I'd have a cigarette before meal, cigarette after the meal.
Yeah.
And that's how it went, you know. But yeah, you're quite right. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, but it is amazing. So, and when you look at it, the concept of opportunity is really a thought structure which allows you now to act in the way that you think is appropriate. And I really find that very, very interesting because those who are very successful in doing it really, really grasp the concept of, can I establish within myself that is impossible, or that I have the same restrictions, or I have the same sort of not possibility as I have when I sit in an airplane. Can I do that during the day? Then I won't have any problems. And really, those that have grasped that, they don't have any problems. But it is very, very. It's a very interesting thing that we. It's a little bit like Pavlov's dogs, you know, the conditioned behavior that they were showing off. But when they start to be aware, it kind of is interesting to see how they react to that.
The most fascinating thing for me about it afterwards was when I stopped smoking. I tried every angle to stop smoking. I tried to stop socializing with all the smokers. I decided I would change my routine during the day. I tried hiding the cigarettes, and then I'd smoke them all and get rid of all the paraphernalia, and I'd be fine for about 4 or 5 days. Then something would happen. I'd be back on the cigarettes again. And each time I went back to smoking, I'd be smoking more. Okay.
Yes.
And this went on and on for ages. And my daughter wouldn't allow me to smoke in the house because she had a chest condition. And of course, the winter came and the children wouldn't allow me to smoke in the house. And then my son was growing up and he said, I'm not kissing you, Mum, because you smell like an old ashtray. And then if I wanted to smoke, I have to go out in the garage. Well, it was freezing cold in the garage in the winter. It wasn't fun to go out there and have a cigarette. So, and I still couldn't stop. You know, I'd have one when I could. I'd disappear somewhere and have a cigarette. But then one morning, I got up. By 11 o'clock, I realized I hadn't had one. And then by 12 o'clock, I still hadn't had one. And by this time, I thought, oh, this is very strange. And I still hadn't had one. I went the whole day and I haven't had one. I've never had one since.
Fantastic.
No idea how or why, because I wasn't trying at that point. I think I'd given up and thought, oh, well, it's not possible for me. But
no, but you...
Well, that's interesting, just what you said there. I think I'd given up and thought it's not possible. So a degree of surrender and acceptance.
Yeah. Well, that's true.
Yeah. But it's nice. I think that surrendering to the process is really also allowing yourself to have that peace that is necessary in order for your decision really to establish yourself on a deeper level. I mean, if you look at for example, smoking. I mean, intellectually everybody knows it's not healthy to smoke. It doesn't make anybody stop. But as soon as Bertie, you were mentioning the cold garage, etc., and the very unpleasant circumstances you had to smoke on if you were to carry on. I think that at some point in time, and that happened to me, at some point in time, I couldn't any longer identify with the behavior. It was as if it was not part of me anymore. I couldn't see myself, and in your case, perhaps it could have been, I couldn't see myself under those miserable conditions just because I had to fulfill some urge. It sort of fell under your concept of dignity, etc., etc. And I think that the moment that happens, then the change is very, very easy, because then the change is happening on a very deep level. You are not no longer controlling your behavior. You are just living out your new life, your new identity.
I had a very interesting experience, actually, because we went, a group of us went to Dublin for the weekend, Northern Ireland. And we went.
Heidi, could you speak up a bit? You're very mute. You're very quiet.
Ah, right.
That sounds promising.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, that's much better.
That's better. Okay. Yeah, a group of us went to Dublin for the weekend. And of course, in the evening, we were going into the bars and people were singing and people were dancing and people were drinking there. And they were smoking. And of course, my eyes just would not stop streaming. And I remember spending most of my time in the bathroom, cleaning my eyes and cleaning my makeup and trying to get away from the smoke. And I remember this old lady saying to me, she said, "Oh, you mustn't cry, dear, you're too pretty to cry." I thought, I'm not crying, it's because of the cigarette smoke. Anyway, one of my friends offered me a cigarette. And I thought, oh. So I took a couple of puffs of the cigarette, and that stopped my eyes running and being affected by the cigarette smoke.
Yeah.
But I didn't enjoy the cigarette, and I never wanted to smoke the whole thing. But that was quite interesting to see that.
Yeah.
A little bit like the homeopathic remedy, I guess.
Yeah, in a very strange way, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. Well, that really on other with other persons and other conditions that could have really have led to a relapse.
Oh yes, it could have done.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Anybody else?
Yes, Vicky, where are you? Would you like to come in? I wonder if Vicky doesn't have a mic. I think that may be the case. Yeah. And we have someone on the phone. I just got a number. I don't know if you would.
Have you also experienced this, that Christian, that surrendering in terms of being in a seminar is really to be able to embrace the silence? So that if nobody's saying anything, that is also okay. It's okay. Yeah. It's okay to be silent. It's okay for somebody to wait for something to show up. I mean, if it's just to show up, then it's all right also. But because then it will show up somewhere else. And that has been one of my big challenges. Really, that being comfortable being silent during a webinar.
Yeah. Yes, I think I'm more comfortable in a seminar or a webinar if I'm a participant as opposed to the host or the facilitator, because I have a thought that I am responsible for. But it occurs to me that the silence is powerful. That when space is created, it's very easy for new thought to come through in that place. And yes. Also, in the same way, I think "I don't know" is a very powerful statement.
Yes.
Because the ego never says "I don't know," or seldom. But it's again, "I don't know," and then the next thing is, "Oh yes," it's even saying it to oneself when you're just about doing something in the house, or "Oh, I don't know how to do that," and then that thing.
Yeah. And it also is also as if that the silence also allows those listening to have a chance to have something pop up in their minds. Because it's when listening, you are sort of cutting yourself off from intuition, etc. So it's as if that the silence in between here really is very pregnant and can lead to new sort of questions from the audience or from the rest of the participants. So silence is really very beneficial once in a while if you can live with it.
Yeah.
I was coaching a client the other day. In fact, I'm mentoring her at the moment on a training, and we became silent. And she got so distressed, she started crying because she just wasn't used to the silence.
Yes. Well, 7 years ago, my wife and I, we went to Holland to a 10-day silent retreat. And the silent retreat was carried out in the way that you came in, you registered your everything that could to draw your attention away from the silent retreat, what you had to deliver at arrival. All of the pictures were covered, all of the windows were covered, so that you were, and we were obviously divided into a male section and a female section. There were no talking, no eye contact, etc. for 10 days. And what happened was really that left all to yourself. We were up at 4 o'clock in the morning, meditating until 7 o'clock. And then there was a breakfast, and then there were a sort of common collective sort of meditation, and then individual, and then collective and individual, and lights out at 9:30. So what happened in the beginning was very interesting, because when left to yourself, as you mentioned, that people can get very uncomfortable in silence. Your subconscious start to throw stuff up into your consciousness that you have been putting a lid on. And I don't consider myself to be a softie, but I really was using tons of paper towels during the first 3 days here, and we registered 121 on the first day, and after 3 days we were down to 100. 21 persons had to left because it was too much.
Yeah.
And it was really a sort of cleansing process that was. It was rough, but having lived through that, on the 4th day, it was as if you had taken a rucksack and full of stones and put it down. It was a relief that was really indescribable. But being alone with yourself is challenging.
Yes, I've seen that too, because I regularly go on 5-day silent retreats. And up till like day 3, you just still, processing stuff, and stuff is coming up. But the 4th and 5th day are beautiful because, as you say, you just feel like you've left it all behind. You're in very different space.
Exactly.
But I've seen quite a few people giving up and going home.
Yeah,
they can't handle it.
Yeah. Well, we decided that the more we had the urge to leave, the more we had a reason to stay.
Yeah.
But it was extraordinary experience. Did you do it in Scotland? Did you do it in Scotland or England or wherever you were?
No, I did it in North Wales. Funnily enough, with people who trained in Findhorn.
Yeah.
But Jenny Brooke, a friend of mine, she runs 2-3 times a year up in North Wales, which is in an old nunnery. And in fact, it was a home of Gladstone, and it's run by Roman Catholic nuns now.
Okay.
It's a beautiful space. The mountain is right behind us and the ocean is right in front of us.
Yeah.
And it's just got beautiful grounds with very old trees and
lovely,
beautiful lawns and flowers. Yeah, just the ideal space. Is fabulous.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't had much silence tonight, and it is 7 o'clock. So, Christian, is there anything you would like to say just to finish us off this evening?
Well, I would like to express my gratitude for being able to participate in this, and thanks for inviting me to be here. And it has really sharpened my appetite to turn my nose in your direction in order to make something up in Scotland at some time. Yeah. That could be very lovely. Okay. So, I think it has been great. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit about what I'm thinking. I really enjoyed that.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate your time. It's lovely to get to know you a bit better. Thank you for sharing with us, and thank you everybody who participated in the call. And I will put the recording up, and I'm just going to stop recording now.